What's up, people? It's another episode of The Mindful CEO, where what are we, slaying dragons
Slaying
of hustle
Dragon.
culture? What is it,
Slaying the
Aaron?
Dragon of Hustle Culture. That's right. One mindful
One,
moment at a time.
one mindful moment. I love that. It's great. Well, welcome, friend. Good to see you again.
It's good to see you
And
again, too. Hey,
your
it's
fantastic background.
it's the old, thank you, thank you. It's the old bald white guy hour. Right?
That's
It's good.
right.
And today we have a guest who's got hair, ladies and
Got
gentlemen.
hair.
I'm working
Thank
on
you.
it though.
He'll get there. Anyway, yeah, Jeremy, it's great to see you again. I know we joked about this pre-show that we met each other 3 months ago and don't remember. But it's great to see you again. In reality, we're seeing you again. And as a leadership coach, you just fit right into this conversation. We started some really cool shit in the green room. So why don't you take a minute, introduce yourself, what you do, how you got here, and then we'll launch in to figure out where we're going from there.
All right. So one thing that most people find interesting, I'm the youngest of 10 kids. So I've
Wow.
had a lot of experience with a lot of different types of people in a high pressure environment.
No kidding.
Growing up, math and science always made sense. So my degree was in mechanical engineering. People really never did growing up. It felt like everybody had a code book that I was missing. And when I was in high school, I got to take a 3 day long Myers Briggs class, and it got me to really fully understanding just how different people can be. So I minored in psychology, and I've been just kind of using that to study communication ever since. So now I do leadership training. It's difficult for anyone who is so good at their job that they got promoted, and then no one teaches them how to do the next thing, which is manage. And I find it's a little more of a challenge for engineers. So those are the types of people I love to work with because I understand their background.
No,
Wow.
that's
Love
great.
that.
Yeah, Jeremy, when you said that, two things struck me as well. Myers Briggs 3 day in high school. That's badass. What a great use of high school. But really, I mean, you guys. So full disclosure to the audience, I don't know my Myers Briggs numbers or letters or whatever. I'm not engaged, and yet, at the high school level, to be engaged like that is great. I mean, I'm just always happy when they do something in high school that provides some relevant kind of thinking, training, interest in life outside rather than.
Well, full disclosure back, it wasn't the school that did it actually. I
Oh,
was in
good.
high school working as a supervisor in an amusement park. And
Oh,
they put us through this class because they
Isn't
thought
that
it'd be
great?
useful. Yeah, it was
Very good. Okay, well
fantastic.
that makes more sense and it's a little less exciting, but still very cool that you did that then, as a youth. And then what you shared about what you do, training people as they move into a new level. I hadn't heard it before that way, but that's really, you are the antidote to the Peter principle. Yes?
That's what I try to be. Yeah.
Yeah, very good. That's good. Yeah,
what'd you call it, Aaron? The Peter
yeah,
principle?
Peter principle is Peter Lawrence. Is that no Lawrence Peters? Lawrence Peters is a Canadian, pretty sure a Canadian business consultant, and developed a whole bunch of different theories. And he said sort of tongue in cheek, but there's a reality to it that inside organizations, people rise to the level of their incompetence.
Hmm. Hmm.
Meaning, you got an engineer; he's really good at his job. He's because the company has no way to really continue to increase his compensation at that role rather than find a way for him to get paid more for doing what he's good at in his sweet spot. They move him into management because that's how you can you can elevate his status, you can elevate his pay. He's really good. You want to give this person some more stuff, but now you've raised him into a condition or into a position where he's incompetent. He doesn't have
Yeah.
he didn't demonstrate great competence in management. He demonstrated great competence in engineering or whatever your industry is. And now he finds himself incompetent. So you
Yeah.
wind up with these managers that have risen to the level of their incompetence, which is both a failure in terms of how we organize businesses in a not mindful way.
Right.
I mean, you're only really elevating him because you need a way to
Yeah.
give him more because he or she has done such a good job. Um,
Hmm.
and then Jeremy, you take those people and you actually give them something so that they're no longer incompetent in this new role, which is exciting. I never, that's fabulous, right? Um, and I never really heard about that. I'd never heard that in what you do before. So, any is that an accurate assessment of the Peter Principle and that
Yeah.
world?
And, the skills that got someone into management are rarely the skills that they need.
Right.
And
Mhm.
it's very often that no one there knows how to train them. And it makes what were your best employees miserable because now they're incompetent and everyone who works for them is also miserable.
Yeah. This might be interesting because this is totally your lane. Um, I think of Albert Einstein's quote about like how everyone's a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it'll live its whole life believing that it's stupid. And so there's this, we were talking, Aaron, about sweet spots. That there's a sweet spot between mindful and CEO, that tension. There's a sweet spot. And if someone is really good as an engineer and has a lot of skills and then is promoted to a manager and that's a leadership skill they haven't developed, I hear a nature nurture in here somewhere. Like, can they become something? I mean, how do they find the sweet spot for something they don't have the skills for? And I'd be curious your take on that.
Yeah, very often they can. There are definite skills and things that you can develop. You talk about a sweet spot, just because something is the sweet spot that you grew up with, like what you have by nature, doesn't mean that that's how you need to behave. So going back to the Myers-Briggs, sorry to keep going back to it, we have a tendency, I have a strong tendency towards introversion, but I can go out and talk to people just like everyone else can. It just took practice. So, yeah, engineers can definitely become good managers. Some have more innate skills than others. Some end up finding out that, what, I can do this, but I don't want to. And then they find a place where they can move up the ladder while still staying in their sweet spot. So it can be
Right.
done.
Yeah, that's valid. I think, Aaron, you were saying like people don't want, we like the sound of the sweet spot. Like, oh yeah, man, that's like but no, we don't want to play there because
Well, you
it's
just think about
gray.
Myers-Briggs. Okay, so we might as well dive right into this thing because any kind of personality characterization, right? Disc profiling, Myers-Briggs. What's the other one? Gallup. I did some Gallup
Strength finders,
strength finders, right? I did that.
Enneagram, yeah, all the things.
Enneagram, right? I've done, so I don't know about you. This may not be universal. I don't want to lay this on everybody, but I think this is the tendency. I think we lean this way, if not are fully camped out there. At least we lean this way that we find out you're a IN whatever, right? Or you're a E whatever your characterization
Yeah.
is in Myers Briggs, or your Enneagram is whatever it is, and then we think that's the way we are.
Hmm.
Because we're binary by nature. Once we get we're looking at pigeon. Oh, that's why this. Oh, this is good. Oh, this is good. And that opportunity to train ourselves out of that or be responsible for that. Look, that's a tendency. That's a default. That's not who you are. You're not born that way. You've developed these particular characteristics, and their utility isn't in you're 6'2", brown eyes, and you're an introvert. That's not the way that is. Introvert is a tendency. 6'2" is a fact, or this particular height. How you measure it is 6'2". It's not even a fact.
Right.
But do you know what I mean? Like, but we don't look for the sweet spot. We don't look for the gray. We don't look for the, oh, well, if this is my tendency, how could I be responsible for that given I want, like I was just talking to someone this morning. We have a guy on our team who has tendencies, right? The only person I've ever met with, no, we all have tendencies, but his tendency is he came to the call. He was asking, look, I got these 3 listings coming on and it's already overwhelming and I don't know how to continue to do my lead gen while I bring these on. Big thing in real estate. How do we manage to do the work that builds the business while we're also managing the incoming business? Big struggle for agents. Because, the work that builds the business is in the background, and it's not urgent.
Yeah.
Lead gen's not urgent. Never shows up as urgent unless you're broke, and then lead gen is urgent. But if you have business coming in, it doesn't show up as urgent. And this thing with urgency is very much inside this world of binary. But he's got this tendency of he will see stuff to do and then put more on his plate than he can be responsible for. He's not masterful with his calendar. Is the skill that I think he's missing is the putting that in your calendar and then honoring your calendar as if it meant something, right?
Yeah.
He's very into priorities. Like this takes priority over that. Where I'm very interested in my word is my priority, and if I gave my word to do this, then I'm doing it, and I don't give my word until I scheduled it out and planned it. So anyway, we're talking about his tendency to do that, and I was saying, well, one way to be responsible for that is, Travis, you know, you've got this tendency. Why don't you take all this that work there is to do and bring it to someone else who's better at the scheduling stuff, and say, how do I get this to work? I can't see how to get this all on my calendar in a way that would work. So bring it to someone else, but we can be responsible for our tendencies. And I think, Jeremy, that's what you're talking about your introversion.
Yeah, and very often I talk to people about not making assumptions about others and trying not to label them just because they're an introvert or whatever it is. But then some people, like you said, will do it to themselves. I deal with a lot of people who are neurodivergent in some way, and I've heard them say, "Well, I'm neurodivergent. That's how it is." I'm like, "No, it's not. That's how it's been. It's not how it has to be. You don't get to use it as an excuse for yourself because, as you said, it's a tendency, and you can work with it or find a way to make that tendency work to your advantage. And as you also said, and push off the things that are not your strengths."
If you were going to be responsible for it as a tendency, or even if you were going to be responsible for it as a fact, if you were going to be responsible, you could be responsible for being, I mean, it rarely comes up that I bump my head on something because I'm responsible for being 6'2". I don't like try and force myself into teeny spaces because we're responsible for some physical characteristics, right? We're just, I don't
Great, yeah.
see myself because I'm responsible for my physical characteristics. Sort of an extreme example, but we didn't used to when we were little. Right. When we were young, we used to just pee whenever we had to pee. You just pee. Oh, look at that! But then you train yourself out of it, right? And I don't care how cold, tired, or drunk you are. You're not wetting the bed because you train yourself out of it.
Right.
And you can train yourself out of if you can train yourself out of that, that's as natural as it is just pee whenever you want.
That sounds like a great tagline. If you can train yourself out of peeing the bed, you can train yourself out of anything.
Feel free to use it, Jeremy, with any of your neurodivergent engineers that are resisting leadership. Be like, look, dude, do you wet the bed? No. All right, well, then you can definitely make this meeting work.
I see a T-shirt in my future.
That's right. It's a tendency that you train people out of. What are some of the biggest challenges when you're starting to work with people who have been promoted, elevated into another position that they haven't developed the skills for yet? What are some of the biggest challenges that you start to bump into that you have to work with them on?
One of the first ones is mindset. They've gotten so used to doing a thing and doing it well and taking pride in getting that thing done. All of a sudden, their job is no longer to get a thing done. It's to help other people get a thing done. And it takes quite a bit of work for them to understand that what you take pride in is the productivity of your team, not having to get anything done. But that's not something that comes naturally. It's something that needs to either have like knocked over their head or really trained and worked on.
Feels like there's like it was just you said that and I pictured like kind of three different, like in the C-suite and then in the trenches of the company doing the work. There is this hustle. There's this value of hustle, value of move forward motion. But then you get to middle. I'll call it middle management. You get in the middle of those two things, where you have somebody as a manager who, yeah, you're still responsible for KPIs and stuff of a team, but like you said, you're getting results through people now. And it's a different skill set than just I go do the work. It's I help them do the work. And so I feel like there's just some different, I was gonna say priorities, but some a different way to view things. I just hadn't really saw that before, but as you said, that's what came to mind. Yeah. Tell me about okay, so one of the challenges that you have is mindset. What's another one that they tend to bump into?
Well, right along with mindset. So, time management and prioritizing goals, again, is another big one because all of a sudden they don't want to spend time just talking with people, but
Mm.
half of the job of a manager is just talking with people. And
Uh,
then the big one that they really struggle with is delegation because it's something that they can do better than the person they're
uh,
teaching. The first time, it's probably faster to just do it themselves. And when I have this conversation in a room full of like 10 new managers, I'll say, today we're talking about delegation. At least half will roll their eyes, and one will normally stand up or raise their hand and said, I tried it before, it doesn't work.
uh,
Because the way they do it is just doesn't work. So once I teach them how to actually delegate well so that they can um, be successful at it. And the other thing I do is I let them realize that it's not just taking something off of your plate. This is the way that you train people. This is how you make your people better. Once they get that in their mind and they're given a step by step process for doing it well, that person who raised their hand and said, I tried it, it doesn't work, is the person whose life has changed because they figured out how to do it well. It saves their time, it makes the people on their team stronger, and it allows them to let go and kind of move up the ladder or move up into a higher level of things that they can spend their time focused on.
yeah.
It's good. It's
I
Go ahead, Chris.
I hear I would think it's like for our listeners, people who sort of on a mindful path, like can hear that and be like, oh yeah, I mean that's obvious. Like, everything you're saying makes total sense to me. And yet, even this morning, I caught myself. I made a post about it this morning. There are certain things I will tell myself when I'm overwhelmed by circumstance, right? Like one of my favorite lines is I don't know, right? Like I'm in a space right now for my own business where I'm wanting to grow, and I have some ideas for how I want to do that, but then I get overwhelmed by all the options. And I have said things. This when I think about things like this, I go, I tried that. That didn't work. Right. Like I think there's an invitation here for listeners to be like, don't just hear it and be like, oh yeah, no, that makes sense. I know that already. The invitation is to look for where do you think you know, or where do you think you tried, or where do you think, I mean, like we have these things we do to ourselves in the name of, yeah, it didn't work, or we're out of our comfort zone. We're not hanging in the sweet spot of that gray area trying to ask better questions. We're just being binary about the discomfort of this question. No, I don't know how to do that.
Yeah,
Anyway.
or like with delegation, sometimes it was either the way you did it or it
Mm,
was the wrong person to delegate to. And if you
mm,
had the first time delegated to the right person, your
yeah.
whole perspective might have been totally different.
I think it's how we, I mean, I think it goes. We don't. I mean, we don't. We use the word management, but it really is. It's so much more about training than it is about management. You're not really managing people. That's not really. I think a disempowering. You don't because the context for managing people is okay. I'm going to now tell you what to do and make sure you do it, which is no one wants that. No one wants to do that, and no one wants that done to them.
Yeah.
So, so I would, Jeremy, you said it. It's really not management. It's really training. It really is. You've got to relate to yourself as you're moving from someone who does a task to someone who's training others to do the task. That's really the world that those people have stepped into, right? You now have a team of 5 people you need to train to be as good as you
Or better.
or better
Sometimes
than
they're
you.
sometimes they're going to be better.
Right. And that's such a fundamentally different job. It's so crazy that that is in fact baked into the business culture that's and there are, I mean, Phil Jackson wasn't half the player that Michael Jordan was. Steve Kerr isn't half the player that Stephen Curry is. Not, these are great managers, great coaches, not great players. I mean, Steve Kerr's a great player. Phil Jackson was a great player. It's not that they weren't great players. They just weren't they were never.
Yeah.
Phil Jackson was not the player he was as a coach.
Right.
He's just, was so much of a better coach because he got his job as a coach was to empower these people to fulfill what they were up to. And he had, was able to do that. And that's just not the context it's not the context that management lives in. And it's not really what we enroll people in when we elevate them to that. And I hear, Jeremy, that's such an important job that you do like that in companies. It just seems like that's so missing. And for the most part, I think it's missing in the meta context of what passes in late stage capitalism for businesses in the West is. And is it that way? Let me ask you, is it that way in the East? Is it that way in Toyota? Is it that way in, Eastern companies?
I wish I could tell you. I have limited experience over there. But they tend to be so process oriented. I worked at Pratt & Whitney for about 9 months, and people from Toyota actually came in to help us with our manufacturing process. And they really struggled because they're used to making millions of one thing, and we were making a handful of very, very complicated things. But their attention to process and detail is something that I think most American companies would really struggle with because it's just so regimented. That's what little I think I understand about them.
Great. Okay. So it's not really a good, not a useful, path to go down. But I just think that's, nevertheless, it's an interesting phenomenon that we, unexamined, it just winds up being management. And it just winds up being a promotion. Yeah. And it just winds up being the next step without it actually being examined to, okay, what's being asked of this person? Are we giving, are they, what are their tendencies? Are they likely to succeed? Are they likely going to need extra support? Because who's ever in the upper management that's going to put this one in there, maybe it's even the owner, right, isn't good at that either. And then where do they go, right? Where does that whole thing live? So I think that's, we got to go back into slowing down, the mindful aspect of slowing down and really looking. All right, well, we've mentioned it a couple of times, and I am actually interested. Talk to me about Myers-Briggs and the utility of it and why that personality test matters, or does it matter any more than any of the others, or, talk, because I'm interested. I've never engaged in it.
They're all good in their own way. It's the one that I like best, but probably because I got that experience early on. And it was just so good at helping me understand the differences. And I am so far on the ends of the spectrums that when I walked in, I said my name. She said, "Oh, good, you're here." I said, "What does that mean?" She said, "I'm going to use you as an example a lot." I'm like, oh, man.
Oh, because you had taken the test.
Yeah, we had all taken it. So she knew our results, and she was basically just waiting for me. And
the case study. You were the case study.
Basically, yeah, 3 out of 4 of them. Yep.
For Aaron, your purposes, there's when you measure these two, there's 4 continuums that you're measuring: introvert versus extrovert. And you can go all the way out. You can go way out on the end of the introvert extreme, or way out on the other end of extroversion extremes, or somewhere in the middle. And this is what you're talking about, Jeremy, right? Like you were so far on the ends of those continuums.
Yeah, I was like a 0 or a 99 most of the time. And technically, they only really predict if you took the tests 100 times, how many times you would score on the introverted side or the extroverted side, for example. But what I found is people who are further on the ends exhibit more traits. At least in my case, that's true.
Sure, that makes sense. Okay, back to you. Sorry,
okay, so
I had to tutor
Aaron. What are the 4? So extrovert, introvert.
Yep. Thinking versus feeling.
Okay.
T versus F, right? That's
that's T versus F.
T versus F. Okay.
Yeah. So the second one is N or S, which is basically big picture versus detail oriented.
Which is
and so N is big picture.
Yep. N is intuitive, so you're kind of like sensing the big picture. Or S is, I think, sensing, so that's paying a lot of attention to details. So the thinking and feeling we did, and then the judging and perceiving is really about, do you like to plan things ahead of time, or are you happy to just kind of feel like you're ready and react to things as they happen?
And so the P would be the last one. The P is like I'm a P, and so I love to like put me in the space, and then I'll react to what's happening in the space. Versus I don't want to get too far out in planning my life because I don't know what's going to happen that I need to react to yet. I can't be that regimented about my life. I need to be. I'm a free bird, man. Let me be
Free bird.
free. Let me-
So why I think it's really useful, if you're a, manager, leader, executive, and you know your tendencies and you're aware of it, and if you can understand that your people may or may not be the same as you will then deliver information, instructions, timelines in a very different way for someone who is like yourself than someone who's different than you. So being aware of it and figuring out how you need to make adjustments is really useful. The world generally has been designed for extroverts. So when you're in school, class participation is part of your grade. When you're at a company, how much of a team player are you? How much do you like to hang out with other people? If you're a manager and you recognize that someone who's an introvert doesn't naturally want to do that, then you're going to give them some spaces where they can do projects on their own or they can have quiet time. Sure, they will need to interact and they will need to do things, but if you recognize that it takes more energy for them, then you're going to give them some of the time that makes their lives easier as well.
I really hear like the sweet spot. Like there's my sweet spot. Then there's my team members' sweet spot based on, let's on this case, based on their Myers-Briggs, let's say. And then there's the team sweet spot. Like if I have a team of introverts and extroverts, what's the sweet spot that gets the team moving down the road together? And those are really, that feels very layered to me. Like that would require some intentional study, some intentional, like I need to think about who are these people. And I think sometimes what can happen in corporate settings or corporate cultures is becomes a one size fits all, you know, for company line. Oh, this is what we do, just follow the model. is mine here from my real estate days. Just follow the model. And then everybody says, well, we just follow the model and nobody thinks for themselves. I'm like, well, what's the sweet spot following the model? Anyway.
It's interesting because it does take. I mean, it, I've certainly there was a piece of software I had a while back, and it would scrape someone's LinkedIn profile and give you back their disc profile based on what they said on their profile, and then it would provide scripts and plans and pitches and things to include in your pitch that would speak to
Wow.
their tendencies, right? Like, and that's what you're talking about. You're talking about building out solutions. Certainly, if you're pitching a product, you definitely want to make it as easy for the buyer as possible. You're not out to train them in any, well, you're not, you'd like to make this speak directly to their concerns. So if you know that they're, a planner, then you would lay out detailed plans for how you're going to list their home. And if they're, not, then anyway, you could build something to speak directly to their predisposition. But it can see if you're training your team and you've got now multiples, and it would take an enormous amount of energy to be responsible for all that. But I would suspect that would pay off in spades because you're no longer having, you're raising up the floor consistently for everybody. You're not leaving anyone behind.
There, like you said, it is layered, but there are degrees to which you can do it. And just the awareness that people are different than you goes such a long way. It takes very little once you're aware that, yep, people truly are different, to recognize when something is a challenge, and then just stopping and asking yourself, like, this is really easy for me. It's not for that person. Let's try and figure out why. When I said that when I was growing up, it felt like people didn't really make sense and everyone had a code book. It kind of felt like people were being difficult on purpose, or that they were pretending to do something. And then when I went through that class and I saw the examples and myself as an example, I'm like, holy cow, people just really can be that different from each other. And you just have to accept it. Like, that's their reality. You have your reality. You have to accept that that is theirs. They have to accept that this is yours and find a way to work together. Find that sweet spot.
Feels like a mindful meditation, Aaron. Like you should add that to your insight timer channel.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because as you're talking, Jeremy, I hear it. That's when it's It's the thought that struck me is it's very consistent with metta, which is
I was thinking that too.
yeah, it is. It's so metta is the Pali Sanskrit word for loving kindness, and
So not
it,
Facebook.
what's that?
So not Facebook then.
Not
Not
meta.
not Facebook meta, no, like meta world peace, like Ron Artest meta. If you're old enough to get that joke,
I do.
that reference. It's loving kindness. It's the opportunity to come to life, come to people, come into life with a orientation of compassion and listening to people and listening to yourself with that kind of grace and space and loving kindness that you if you're list if you know the what you said, you just have to realize that everyone's different. You just realize that each person has their own life going on. There's a great word. I think John Koenig is the author of this book of made up words to handle these profound human states, and he made up the word sonder. And do you know what it is? Have you heard it?
I just remember Seth Godin talking about Sonder.
Yeah, sonder is his word. So I mean, look, all words are made up. Okay, so it's not like he made up a word. Big deal. All words are made up, but he made up this word, and it means the realization that any person you talk to has a life as rich and complex as your own. And that's sonder, is the realization of that everyone you see is living a life as rich and complex as your own. And that's very in tune or resonant with metta as a place to come from in life, is opportunity. Where I put that meditation in the training for real estate agents is in communication, is in mindful communication, because without that understanding, there's no communication happening. There's no listening happening. If you can listen from kindness, which is really essentially, Jeremy, at the heart of it, what you're talking about, you're listening to other people like, wow, that person has a completely different view of reality than me. And it's valid. It ties into that, the Buddhist principle that if you had lived the life this person has lived, you would turn out just like them. You meet people on the other side of the political spectrum, and what's missing is any realization that had you lived the life that they lived, you would be them. That there's no separation there, that there's no, and that's, again, I think, Jeremy, I mean, that's sort of a meta 1T take at what you're talking about, like that understanding. And if you bring these distinctions in tendencies, personality types, tendencies to the conversation, you can begin to see and pinpoint, oh, maybe it's here that we could do some work given your tendency is this. You're just bringing some distinction to it. But the 10,000 foot overview of it is, look, we don't know, but we're interested. Let's look. And that's funny because I coach leadership training as well. And when I coach the coaches, when I train the coaches, I give them a 3-sentence script, and it's the best script I've ever come up with, and it works. And you can do these sentences in any order, but the only thing they need to train themselves in is, I don't know, let's look, I got your back. Nice. And you could start that you could start with, let's look, I got your back, I don't know, or I got your back, I don't know, let's look. It doesn't matter which order you put those 3 sentences in, but if you're a coach and you're out to develop someone and you have those 3 sentences, you're good. You can get it done. You can absolutely elevate that person if you are authentically standing in that space. And I think that's what you're pointing to, yes?
Yeah, I like that. And I am less philosophical than you. but I think about it from improv because I like to do improv.
Great.
Oh, nice.
And the overarching rule of improv is yes and.
Yes, and
If somebody on the stage says a thing, if they say your hair's on fire, you don't get to argue. Your hair is on fire. And when you're having a conversation with someone that you don't agree with, it's not, you don't have to take it that far that it's now the only reality, but it helps you to understand that is their reality. They're not saying it to make your life difficult. That is really their reality. And rather than fighting it, say, yes, that's your reality. And how can we find a consensus together?
right.
Yeah.
And that brings us right back to the sweet spot. Like there is some space, a consensus. There's some space in the middle there that is going to include aspects of both our experiences.
Yeah.
And we are, and to be responsible for, we are predisposed to dislike sweet spots. We're predisposed to be not looking for them. We're predisposed to having it our way. We're predisposed to binary thinking. Yes or no, black or white. Just give me the answer. Don't tell me to figure it out. I don't want to do any thinking about this. Where should we go eat? There's no fucking gray here. Just tell me what you want me to do.
Mm-hmm.
All those things are way easier than, I don't know, let's look.
I got your back.
I got your back. We're going to figure this out. And those are complex. And the world is complex. The world is gray. The world is not black or white. So I
Makes me
think
think
it's a
of,
very interesting place to play.
it reminds me of Rick Rubin stuff a little bit, the creative act, like just the sitting with it, being with it, like just show up and then and see like, and that's harder work to do than just, make a to-do list and check things off your to-do list, like to show up and be like, what's here?
Right.
I don't know. Let's see. That's very much and I think as a manager, somebody who's used to doing the task and the work, and now you have to deal with people, which is so different. Starting with showing up to your people and being like, well, what's here? What's here? Because people are strange. People are, oh, it's an Echo and the Bunnymen song. People are strange. Actually, that was a Door song first, wasn't
Door
it?
song.
Yep.
Yeah.
Is it Echo Bunny Man too?
In the Lost Boys movie back in the day with Kiefer Sutherland, Echo and the Bunnymen did a rendition of that. Yeah.
Oh, look at you.
Yeah, I'm dating myself here. Anyway, I think that's I love that, Jeremy, from the sake of like just what you said. Like if people can just get to know that there is another version, another personality style, that goes a long way. That's like almost an 80% to deal that 20% deal that gives you 80% of the results. Like just learn those skills, and then you can help your team find their sweet spots.
It's good.
Yeah.
But you had said, and I would, the checklist thing,
Yeah.
that effort thing. Because I would bet, Jeremy, you'll have to tell me if I'm right about this, but the people that have tried delegating, right? The guy that raises his hand, I tried that, it doesn't work. Every time that I've run into that, it's been, I told them what to do. I gave them the list of things to do, and they didn't do it. The fuck do you want from me? I delegated it and it didn't get done. I did that.
That's often the case.
Yeah.
And just on the topic of delegation and the very simplistic thing that almost everyone falls down on is checking in regularly
Yeah.
and telling people when you're going to check in, or better yet, having them check in with you so that you're not micromanaging them. But if it's a 10-day long project and they are told they have to come to you at day 2 with a progress report, then you get to fix the problems. But most people just abdicate and they say, here's what to do, go do it. And then 10 days later, they're pissed that it didn't get done or it didn't get done right.
Yeah. Yeah. That's often my experience.
That feels true for life. I mean, in some ways, like we all have our own projects and we don't give ourselves progress reports or think times to check in. And so then we get 10 days down the road and we're pissed that the thing didn't happen.
That's
Anyway,
good.
that's
No,
my
that's
own.
good.
That was
That's nice.
this mindful moment has been brought to you by
No, that's good, Chris.
Jeremy Doran.
I think that's accurate. I do think we don't give ourselves enough space.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Or even opportunities to look to see how is that going. Yeah, I think it's all part of that whole resistance to being told what to do, the resistance, the wanting. Look, I said I would do it. I'm doing it. Right? You don't have to remind me every 6 months. I just got into this with my wife, right? About a project. I was like, look, I said I was going to do it. You don't have to get on me every 6 months about it. I promise. I will do it.
It's a project that takes more than 6 months.
Oh no, it took me 15 minutes. I just
I can't
haven't
believe
done
she
it.
questioned you like that.
Right? I mean, the fucking hag. I mean, Jesus.
The nerve.
The
Oh my
nerve.
God.
No, it literally took me 15 minutes to do it on Sunday. Um, but there you
That's
go.
funny.
But 6 months and 15 minutes.
Yeah. That's so funny. Jeremy, if you had to sort of like give us some parting wisdom here about your sort of your body of work and the conversation we're having today about sweet spots, like any sort of final.
Yeah, I guess my podcast is now called Neuroconversant Leadership, but when I started, it was called How to Talk to Weirdos.
Oh, love it.
And the reason for that is because everyone's a weirdo. We're all so different. So if you just talk to everyone and try as hard as you can, when something goes wrong, say, what assumption am I making and why is that probably wrong? And then step back and take a look at it, because that person may be weird, but so are you.
That's being mindful. I love that.
I
By the
love
way,
it.
I think that's a great tagline. You have with your new name. What is it? Which neuroconversant?
Neuroconversant Leadership.
With a subtitle, How to Talk to Weirdos.
All right. Yeah, maybe I'll build that
Keep,
back
keep
in.
it back. I would listen to a show called How to Talk to Weird. Yeah, very good. Really
Yeah.
great. Jeremy, thank you so much for being here. If people want to get a hold of you and they want to learn how to talk to weirdos, where they go? So you got a podcast.
I got a
How else do they reach you?
podcast. You can find me on my webpage, neuroconversantleadership.com, or an easy way is LinkedIn, and it's Jeremy Doran. Jeremy Doran Speaks on LinkedIn is how to find me.
Fabulous.
Awesome.
Great,
So
Jeremy.
good. Love
Thanks
it.
for the time.
Thanks for being
Really
on the show.
appreciate
Yeah.
the conversation. Super fun.
Yeah, thanks. This has been wonderful.
Guys, listening, we'll use that as a non-binary term. Hey guys, if you like the show, please like the video. Like it. And if you're listening on some podcast directory, feel free to review it. Subscribe to the channel as well, so that you're notified when the next interview comes out. And then, Aaron, I mean, I know you've got the next 9-week programs coming up in May. I think you said, or
May 28th,
so.
there's Hustle to Flow, Sell More by Stressing Less, and How to Live a Grateful Life in a Fucked Up World, mindfulness training for the rest of us. Both of them are open. The wait list is open for both of those courses on the website. So Hustle to Flow is on therealtorsedge.com, and How to Live a Grateful Life in a Fucked Up World is on thegratefulbreath.com.
I'll put those links, and I'll put your link in the show notes as well. And there you go. Choose your own adventure, friends. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being on the Mindful CEO. And until next time, be well.